So the default position when it comes to thinking about things or approaching things in general is usually to think about what things are. So maybe a definition would suffice. But I think there's one other approach we can incorporate in this conception that can actually give us a broader view about our plans and meanings and the things we're trying to think about. And that approach is to actually think about what things are not. And I know this sounds like a crazy claim, like what things are not is usually everything else, basically. So what a car is not is everything else in the universe. So how come we need to think about these things? But I think this conception is pretty silly when it comes to the physical world, things like cars and computers and cameras and all these things, because we know what a camera is not. We know what a car is not. But once we move towards the abstract side of things, the line between what the thing is and what the thing is not becomes blurry, to say the least. So keeping this conception when it comes to approaching things and thinking about things is pretty valuable. And I think one good example of actually applying this conception we've put forward is when we're trying to think about questions like the meaning of life, for example. And we'll hear a variety of answers to this question, but if we take one sample answer that is very common, things like being happy is the meaning of life, or experiencing is the meaning of life.
What is the meaning of life to you?
To find your fullest expression of the reality of who you are and see it fulminate into its best version through your journey through life.
The meaning of life is just doing what makes you happy every day, no matter what anybody else thinks.
Yeah, just live life to the fullest, I guess. Like, do what you want.
Of life, this can sound cliche, but like to chase your dreams and do whatever makes you happy.
Yeah, I guess like find your true passion and help other people while doing it.
Well, personally, I think the meaning of life is to experience or like have lots of experiences, to experience happiness, sadness, to, strengthen our relationships with family and friends.
Once we take those answers and try to think about them with regards to the model we put forward, we see that, for example, experience, we understand what experience is, but when we ask the question of what experience is not, there isn't any options left, basically, because everything is experience to some extent when it comes to human beings. So this meaning that one puts forward becomes meaningless, if that makes sense, because everything is experience. What's the limit towards that meaning? So if you don't set, I guess, a limit towards your definitions, or you don't set a limit towards thinking about things, then they almost become meaningless when we try to actually think about them as answers or conceptions. The second one was being happy, for example. So being happy is an infinite variety of things. And so the conception of seeing what things are not aids us in setting a limit towards the definition, if that makes sense. And as we said, the more we move towards the non-physical side of things, the more that becomes important to apply and consciously think about, because in the physical world, we can actually see what a chair is, and we can see what its limits are with our own eyes. To take this example one step further, there is one specific answer that actually stood out to me when it comes to the question of the meaning of life as well, that we can actually apply our logic to. And it was an answer by Daniel Schmachtenberg in a podcast, actually. And the answer was basically that the meaning of life is doing, being, and becoming. He gave a very detailed answer about the difference between meaning and purpose and all these things, which are very interesting, but he came down to the conclusion that the meaning of life is doing, being, and becoming. And by being, he meant the ability to actually experience the different beauties and all these other things of life. By doing, he meant the action of purporting those experiences to other people, whether it's by doing science or all these other things he've mentioned. And becoming is actually the improvement of these two domains, basically. So he said that those three things make up a meaningful life if they're applied together, if that makes sense.
That a meaningful life involves the mode of being, the mode of doing, and the mode of becoming. And it involves a virtuous relationship between those three. And that any of those modes on their own also have failure modes that are not a meaningful life. The mode of being, the way I would describe it, if we're talking about the essence of it, is about taking in and appreciating the beauty of life that is now. It's a mode that is in the moment and that is largely about being with what is. It's fundamentally grounded in the nature of experience and the meaningfulness of experience. The prima facie meaningfulness of when I'm having this experience, I'm not actually asking what the meaning of life is. I'm actually full of it. I'm full of experiencing it.
The momentary experience. The
Yes.
moment.
So taking in the beauty of life. Doing is adding to the beauty of life. I'm going to produce some art. I'm going to produce some technology that will make life easier, more beautiful for somebody else. I'm going to do some science that will end up leading to better insights or other people's ability to appreciate the beauty of life more because they understand more about it or whatever it is. Or protect it, right? I'm going to protect it in some way. But that's adding to or being in service of the beauty of life through our doing. And becoming is getting better at both of those. Being able to deepen our being, which is to be able to take in the beauty of life more profoundly, be more moved by it, touched by it, and increasing our capacity with doing to add to the beauty of life.
And so if we take our approach and try to apply it to this model of doing, being, and becoming, we see that the idea of being, for example, or experiencing is not clear what it's not, if that makes sense, because everything from a human perspective is, or another way of saying it is that there's an infinite variety of things that humans can experience beauty with, which means that it's not clear what it's not, which by extension means that the limit towards the definition of being or experiencing is not very much clear to us. So this is one example of trying to apply our approach with, and that doesn't mean necessarily falsifying the model or just leaving it all together, but it's just a good way of actually challenging thoughts and trying to think about them more and refining them. Now, one last context that can actually make us see the approach much more clearly is the world of plans. So when we try to plan, we usually don't plan a very general plan because general plans don't have limits. So we try to be more specific in order to get things done. So for example, if you declare a plan of making money, that doesn't really mean much because you don't understand what it's not, as we said, because there's an infinite variety of ways you can make money. But as soon as you make a very specific plan and see what that thing is not, so for example, if you want to do a business in the food industry, for example, that's a very specific way of making money, which you understand what it's not, if that makes sense, as opposed to the very general plan of making money, which you don't really understand what it's not. So with that, we conclude the video. Thank you very much for listening and see you next time.